Though I do not believe that a plant will spring up where no seed has been, I have great faith in a seed, wrote Henry David Thoreau. Convince me that you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders. Around this time last year, I was beginning my 3-month sabbatical. Parenting responsibilities for my then 1.5-year-old and tight personal finances and my own 4-month pregnant body meant that most of my sabbatical would be spent at home here in Philadelphia. And so I wanted a few soul-feeding projects that I could accomplish from home while away from the day-to-day demands of ministry. I signed up for a class, I made some commitments to myself around spiritual practice, and I set about planting a garden. And some of you know how much joy I get from growing tomatoes in my little postage stamp row home backyard, because I've preached about it several times before. But this year, with so much more time available to devoting towards garden preparation, I wanted to branch out. Get it? Branch out and grow flowers, particularly cut and come again flowers, because I had convinced myself in, again, preaching to you about the value of cut and come again flowers, that I should grow them myself. I wanted flowers that were going to be beautiful in my own yard and that I could also cut outdoors and bring in to adorn my inner rooms of my home without diminishing their ability to bloom again outdoors. I love the idea of flower gardening, but buying enough flower starts at the hardware store or nursery or wherever each year to look meaningful in my yard always felt too expensive. And so this year I was going to go the cheaper route and start them from seed. I envisioned lovely, curvy flower beds filled with dahlias and cosmos and bachelor's buttons and marigolds, snapdragon and violets in my front yard, with some additional flowers planted in my raised beds in the backyard alongside my usual tomatoes and peppers and greens and herbs. I imagined having so many flowers that my home would be overflowing with bouquets, and that the new baby I welcomed in June into my home would be welcomed into a bedroom full of blossoms when she arrived. I imagined learning so much that I could continue this practice into the coming years, but in a simpler and a more streamlined way, that my sabbatical garden of 2023 would give rise to an abundance of flowers indoors and out for the rest of my life. You're laughing because you know probably how this story ends, but we're not going to go there yet. So how many of you are gardeners or take care of plants in your homes? How many of you like the idea of it but aren't actually good about it in practice? I'm both. How many of you have started seeds indoors before? Okay, a good number. You know what's up. I have done limited experiments in starting plants from seed before, so it wasn't completely new for me, but this year I really wanted to go big. So for those of you who haven't started seeds indoors before, the purpose of starting plant from seed inside early is essentially to grow them into sturdy little seedlings by the time that they can be planted outdoors. This means you get your tomatoes or your basil blossoms earlier, or your blossoms earlier than if you planted them just directly outside once the soil warmed up outside. It also gives you a bit more control over the process. When you start seeds indoors, you can create ideal conditions for the start of their little lives, and it increases the chance that the whole shebang is going to work. And so last January, I bought my seeds and I calculated what I wanted to grow and when the seeds should be planted, and I set up something like 200 or 250 little planter cells in my basement on a little table in a warm corner of my basement. I filled the cells with a combination of simple dirt and some sterile seed starting medium, because I knew that each seed contains all of the nutrients that they need already for the first part of their life. So seeds don't really need fertile soil almost until they're planted in the ground. It's not true of all seeds, but it's true of many seeds. And I bought shop lights, and I rigged this adjustable system for them to hang above my seed cell so that I could keep them the recommended few inches above the soil and then above the tops of the plants as they grew, and I could raise them up on a little pulley system. I draped the whole thing with aluminum foil so as much light as possible could bounce around in their little cubes of earth. And I bought a special watering can so that the amount of water sprinkled on each cell wasn't going to be too much and it would flood them, or too little and they wouldn't get wet deeply enough. Starting seeds indoors means you have to provide absolutely everything for them, for your little plants to be. Unlike putting a seed in the soil in late spring, when the sun will warm the ground and give the right amount of light to encourage them to sprout, you have to create that warmth and light yourself when you start them indoors, or they simply will not grow. Unlike starting seeds outdoors and relying on the rain to dampen their little seed coats so they will soften and the embryo within can become plump and push its roots down and its little leaves up, you have to water the seeds at the right intervals so that they're not too dry and they're not too waterlogged. And unlike trusting that your stems and your leaves will grow sturdy in the regular breeze and the regular little nudge of hopping sparrows, you should even set up a little fan to blow gently on your seedlings in the basement so that they'll be able to cope with the more rough conditions of the outdoors once they eventually make their way out there. When you are responsible for your tiny little seed's whole world, when you are warmth and light and water and breeze and everything else, it's time intensive. Even the things that can be automated, like putting your lights on a timer, which I immediately did, only saves you a little bit of effort. And if you take just a small break from the regular light and the watering, the plants will die before they ever see the real light of day. And your weeks or months of effort can be lost in a couple of lazy days of skipping your seedling parental duties. It is perhaps not a surprise to any of you that my sabbatical garden yielded mixed results. Though my indoor seed starting setup worked fairly well, there were the usual complications of some seeds that never sprouted and some seeds that grew so fast they became root-bound before they were ready to go outside. And I was able to commit to the work of ensuring that the seeds mostly had their daily light and warmth and water needs met for the first few months. But by the time that I was ready to dig up and prepare my outdoor flower beds, my rapidly growing pregnant body was not interested in that kind of manual labor at all. At all. And maybe more importantly, the weather wasn't really right to bring most of my plants outdoors until several busy weeks after I returned to ministry here, when I no longer had the spare time to plant at a leisurely or thoughtful pace. And so I refused to let my months of seedling husbandry to go to a complete waste, and so I packed too many of my little seedlings into my raised beds in the back that were already, set up for planting, for growing things. And summer brought a tangle of lovely flowers with bent stems because I didn't properly support them. And I loved seeing them out the kitchen window when I was doing the dishes, but my dreams of vases filled with bouquets and both yards filled with stunning color for months on end did not materialize. To bring my vision of flowers into being, when my vision required me not only to plant seeds, but also to become the sun and the darkness, and the wind and the clouds, and the hopping sparrows and the burrowing earthworm, my vision was too hard to sustain. And when my own time became crunched, and when my body hit new limits, the whole vision almost wilted into a brown, crispy, dead mess. Even though I was able to rescue it from complete failure, it felt so hard to do that I do not intend to try it again this year. My hope of a sabbatical project that might become an easy routine on a year-to-year basis and fill my life with flowers forever was a decided flop. And so, my friends, here we are again at the beginning of another year. And though not all of us make New Year's resolutions, I think the turning of the year is often a time for reflection and intention setting for many of us. Even if we're not viewing this time of year as an important point of reflection, there are so many goals and hopes that we each have at all times. Hopes for peace and justice in Palestine and Israel, hopes for our anti-mass incarceration work here in Philadelphia, personal hopes to rehab after a fall or heal from a past trauma, even just individual resolutions to do less, like Reverend Scotchko preached about last week. We're often working towards goals in our lives, but sometimes those goals feel so big and so distant, or our societal power or our personal willpower feels so meager that we can sink beneath our discouragement before we get where we want to be. Though I do not believe that a plant will spring up where no seed has been, I have great faith in a seed, Thoreau writes. Convince me that you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders. This year, the fullness of my life as a parent of young children and a more than full-time minister makes my own intentions and hopes feel more challenging to reach than ever before. In my own life, I have almost no spare time and almost no ability to add something to my schedule, whether it's more time in nature, more time moving my body, more time in meditation, more time with friends, all things I pretty much resolve to do every year. In the global sense, I'm feeling enormous urgency around climate change and the massive violence and humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza. And my own ability to affect change in either realm feels minuscule. And so this year, I'm turning my attention to where I can plant seeds. Last year, when I had time to devote to my goal of a large flower garden, I could afford to start indoors, to both plant the seed and be the sun and the night, the wind and the rain, and the hopping sparrow and the earthworm for the little lives in my care. But when a seed is planted outdoors in a season and in a climate that is friendly to it, the whole world around us conspires to bring it into life. Planting a seed at a friendly time and place grows a flower just as beautiful as the intensive effort of seed starting indoors and early. Though I do not believe that a plant will spring up where no seed has been, I have great faith in a seed. I initially thought that that quote was written metaphorically, though I recently discovered that, in fact, Thoreau wrote those words literally because at the time, in the mid-1800s, there was a widely accepted theory that some plants just spring spontaneously into life, independent of roots or cuttings or seeds. These words from his work, The Dispersion of Seeds, was literally about how wind and weather and animals move seeds around to produce new plants, built on Darwin's theory of natural selection. He wrote that not as a metaphor. People at the time literally believed plants would spring up where no seed has been. And so remembering that just around 150 years ago, though agricultural practices had existed for 12,000 years already, many people still believed that plants could just spring up spontaneously out of nowhere. It reminds me of how much is still unknown to us even today. I'm sure that there are some things that each of us was taught as hard scientific fact when we were young that has since been disproven. I mean, my whole childhood, Pluto was a planet. Pluto was the 9th planet in our solar system. I can still sing you a song about it. And then all of a sudden, scientists came to new agreement that in fact Pluto is not a planet like the other 8. I don't know what the songs are now, but I will have to learn the new ones to teach my own children. Theories like quantum physics and multiverses were really, really far out when I was young, and they're accepted truths now. And what of those things that we believed were impossible when we were young, but are true now? I know that many in this sanctuary were adults before the first human landed on the moon. That must have been an incredible miracle. Most of us here grew up with queerness being classified by the medical community as a mental illness. And certainly it didn't seem possible for all of us LGBTQIA++ people to have legal protections or rights at all. In my own family, my daughter, who grew inside me as surely as those little seedlings sprouted leaves that last January, was barely imaginable when I was a child. Because Robin, my little girl, is genetically the child of my spouse, conceived from his egg and from our donor friend's sperm before being implanted into my uterus. My trans masculine partner assumed his whole life that he would never have biological children, because his particular gender identity never included the idea of being pregnant. I know that's not true for all transmasculine people, but it was true for him. He knew he was never going to have a biological child. And all children are miracles, whether they're biologically ours, whether they're carried by us or by somebody else. But Robin's story feels particularly miraculous to me, not only because of the incredible science that made her life possible, but also because despite so many attacks on queerness in our country, our health insurance even paid for us to create our family like that. What else might feel totally impossible now, but become within reach in future years? What might feel like hard truth now that we discover later on was wrong? What impossible flowers might await us when we plant the seeds in a friendly time and place? Maybe instead of sinking beneath our defeat this year when we are trying to reach goals that require us to be soil and sun and rain and breeze and earthworm and hopping sparrow in order to help something important grow, maybe instead we can simply plant the seeds, plant them where they're meant to be, and trust that the forces of life will all conspire together to bring about flowers and ripen the fruit. Convince me that you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders, wrote Thoreau. Or I should say, my friends, I just learned that Thoreau wasn't even pronounced Thoreau. It was pronounced Thorough. Henry David Thoreau. Learned that this morning. A friend posted a cartoon on her Facebook page this past week that showed two characters talking, and one was standing up and the other was sitting on the ground in front of the first one digging in the dirt. And the standing person said, "Aren't you terrified of what 2024 will be like? Everything is so messed up." And the sitting one said, "I think it will bring flowers." And the standing one said, "Yes? Why?" And the digging one said, "Because I am planting flowers." My friends, let us plant seeds. May the conditions be friendly. And let us be prepared to expect wonders. Amen, and blessed be.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.